As we hit 6:30, I'm ready to get this meeting kicked off. We'll start with some introductions. I'll introduce myself, LUN, and then we'll go around the room with having the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll go into Q&A. So thanks everyone for joining. My name is Paul Vranis. I am on the board of directors of Lowry United Neighborhoods, also known as LUN. LUN is our registered neighborhood organization, sometimes called an RNO here in Lowry. It's the only RNO that represents all of the Lowry residents, both renters and homeowners in all of Lowry neighborhoods, including Boulevard 1. Our goal in LUN is to represent the interests of Lowry with the city of Denver. We receive all notices of the city regarding actions that may affect our neighborhood, from traffic, safety, zoning changes, city planning blueprints. Our goal is to protect the integrity of the neighborhood in a manner that's inclusive of all our needs and interests in our diverse community. So we want to welcome everyone that's new to LUN. A little bit of recent activity that you might have heard of. We started about a month or so ago a Lowry Coronavirus Help Group. That's been a way for us to connect those with resources and abilities with those that have a need. So those that might be elderly or immunocompromised with just some of the basic needs. And we've been so blessed and thankful to have dozens and dozens of Lowry residents really step up and help those in needs, from everything from food to some activities and Easter eggs over the past weekend, just to try and return some normalcy to a lot of folks' lives in these times. So wanted to thank LUN and the board members for giving us the opportunity to have this platform, and everyone that's served and engaged in LUN in the past. And look out for that Coronavirus Help Group if you haven't, if you're not already on that list. We'll send some more information following this meeting. But that's it from myself and from LUN. With that, we'll give everyone, the panelists, a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself and take it from there. So let's start with Chris and then move on over to Stephen and Amanda and Carrie.
Great. Well, thank you, Paul, and thanks for calling this meeting and organizing this meeting. It's great to connect with everybody. I know everybody on this call has been doing different virtual town halls through Facebook, through Zoom calls, and it's great to be able to have some extra time with the Lowry United Neighborhoods group, and I really appreciate you pulling this together. My name is Chris Hansen. I am a state senator for Senate District 31. I was previously House of Representatives for HD 6. And really pleased to join you tonight, and looking forward to diving into the questions about what's going on with the state government, particularly around the budget and different ideas that we have for the recovery program, and appreciate getting some of those questions in advance, and look forward to the dialogue. So thank you, Paul.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul. Thanks so much, Chris. Thank you so much to LUN for putting on this meeting. It's so important right now to make sure people have accurate, up-to-date information and channels to get all of our questions answered. This is obviously an unprecedented time for all of us. And just so you know, I'm Representative Stephen Woodrow from House District 6. HD 6 covers everything from Downing to Havana, Colfax down to Florida. So it definitely covers Lowry and all of LUN. What we will talk about tonight, just in addition to the fiscal picture and sort of the general overall legislative picture, you know, we're going to get into the nitty gritty on how bleak and dim it sort of is and has become. And so the pressure that's putting on the legislature to really pare down what our priorities are over the next several months. I'm also looking forward tonight to discussing and answering questions about what our strategy is going forward to returning back to what I would loosely call normalcy. Today, the governor unveiled a 3-step approach that deals with urgent, stabilization, and then recovery steps. And so I hope we can go over that tonight in a little bit of detail. Overall, just again, reiterate, thanks so much for having this meeting. Just to assure everyone on the call that, you know, me, Senator Hansen, Councilwoman Sawyer, and President Olson meet quite regularly. And we've been able to keep in regular communication, updating each other on what's happening on the ground and at the various levels of government. And it's been very encouraging just to see how well folks are able to facilitate different discussions and elevate different concerns. Real quick before I turn it over, it was LUN and Paul who elevated and shown a lot of light on EBT delivery services. And we were able to escalate that concern all the way up to Congressman Joe Neguse, who introduced a bill on it. So you all are doing incredibly important work. I'm super excited to be here, and just thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. That was, yeah, the Lowry community, just really quickly, we had something that just bubbled up through the Lowry community as a need that folks that are on benefits can't have groceries delivered, and people were having to choose between getting exposure to the virus and going hungry. And so now we've got something at the national level with the US government to open up and remove some of these restrictions for people across the country. So great teamwork across the board. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Paul, thank you so much for your activism on that. You know, you bringing that to all of us was really amazing because your help in identifying that and bringing it to us was really what started the ball rolling on that. So that was incredible. Thank you for that. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a Councilwoman Amanda Sawyer, Denver City Councilwoman for District 5. Thanks so much for having me tonight. As many of you know, this is not my first LUN meeting. We meet pretty regularly. So I'm looking forward to updating you on what's going on in the city this evening and answering a lot of your questions. And I will turn it over to Dr. Olson. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, Paul, again, for all your advocacy around this. And we've gotten to know each other virtually around your advocacy on the school performance framework as well. So I just appreciate that all you're doing for your community. And thank you to everybody for being here. It has been wonderful to sit in on the calls and learning about what's happening at all the different levels of our government. So my name is Dr. Carrie Olson. I'm the president of the Denver Public Schools School Board, and I represent District 3, of which this fabulous elementary school is a part. I wore my shirt in honor of you all tonight. And it's an honor to be here, and it's great to be able to get more information out. As Mr. Woodrow said, it's really important that we keep lines of communication open now. So it's great to be able to be here and share whatever information we have. So with that, I'll let you take it away, Paul. Thank you.
Sounds good, thanks. And thanks for everyone that has come in and has asked questions online, that has sent me emails. We've got an hour and we've got a lot of questions, and I'm sure across a lot of different lines of topics. I'm gonna try and bunch together the questions that we've received from multiple people and sort of paraphrase some of them in the spirit in which I believe that they're being asked. I think that the first question, and Chris, you sort of started talking about that, and Steve as well, is the budget and what related to, I say specifically related to our state's tax revenue, impacts to state's revenue and expenses. There was a specific question about how does Tabor play into this? I know that there was talks of a refund. I don't think those are talks anymore. And then also an interesting question that I hadn't heard of is impacts related to para for the pension. So I'll let you guys to jump in on that.
Yeah, sounds good, Paul. Yeah, a lot to cover there. I'll do my best to take each of those different parts in turn, and then ask for Steve to help me out and fill out additional information. So last year I was a member of the Joint Budget Committee, and then this year I'm now in the Senate as part of the Finance and Appropriations Committees. And so have had a chance to work a lot with the state budget, and we'll continue to do that as we come back into session. I should say, just before we get into some of the budget details, it would appear that the Budget Committee is going to start meeting again in early May if things continue to improve. Assuming we're still on a positive trajectory, the legislature will start some committee meetings in early May, and then coming back into full session sometime in mid-May. That is our current plan. Fingers crossed, we'll be able to come back and do that in a public way and open the Capitol back up so we can get back to work. Obviously, lots of important work to do given the crisis that we're in. So with that as kind of our expected timeline to get back to the Capitol, let me just dive into a few of the details about the budget. So the Colorado state budget is approximately $33 billion in total as of last year. We are estimating that the reduction in income tax and sales tax, which is the vast majority of general fund revenue that comes in, is going to be down by about $3 billion for next year. So on a year that would typically be somewhere between 11 and 12 billion, we think we're going to be down about $3 billion is the current expectation. And some of you probably saw the headlines today about sort of a 10% contraction in retail at this point. We think we're at about 13% unemployment at this point. And before the crisis, we were at about 3% or less than 3%. So that gives you a little bit of a ballpark estimate of where we think we are with the current projections. So if we're down $3 billion on essentially an 11 or $12 billion of expectation, that kind of gives you a sense of the scope of the problem. Now, the good news is we do have some help that we're expecting from the federal government. About $1.6 billion is currently in the pipeline. There is some concern, though, that the restrictions on the aid coming from the federal government may make it difficult to backfill certain parts of the state budget. So that's certainly not a one-for-one replacement at this point. There's ongoing conversations in Congress about adding more flexibility for state and local governments. But we know some backfill coming from the feds. And there's about an $850 million reserve fund that we put in place last year. So if you add up federal aid of 1.6 billion plus 800 million in reserve, we're at about 2.5 billion, give or take, in backfill money available to help us cushion the blow, which we expect to be about $3 billion. So again, rough numbers, I'm giving you my best guess based on the data we have at this point, but we're down 3, but we've got about 2.5 to help us out. So all of that is to say, we've got a tough budget situation. There's going to be some shortfalls. There are going to be some significant cuts that we're going to have to make to different parts of the budget. And we are talking right now about where we should prioritize and where we think we can tighten our belt for this upcoming budget. Now, there was a comment about Tabor in your question. I did want to address that. The bitter irony is that we are in a Tabor refund year right now. So taxpayers in Colorado are going to receive Tabor refunds based on 18-19 budget at the exact same time when we're going to have to be making severe cuts to the upcoming budget. It, to me, highlights the insanity of Tabor, and I am very public in my opposition to Tabor. There's no secret to most people on the phone. It is ruining our state, and this is a perfect example of how ridiculous it is and makes it impossible for us to do proper fiscal management. I would love to see Tabor go away, but it's in our Constitution as it currently sits. So we do our best to manage it in the state legislature, but it will continue to be a problem. And this moment that we're sitting in, I think, highlights how big of a problem it is. The last thing I'll mention, then I'll turn it over to Steve for additional comments from legislature. There was a question, Paul, embedded in there about para and what is the possible impact on para. Now, the good news is the state budget is supportive of para. We are expecting that to continue. The vast majority of money that flows into para, of course, is from employer and employee contributions. Those are still set to happen. And para is set up so that a very large chunk of the portfolio is in low risk bonds and other fixed income instruments. And so we don't see any big clouds on the horizon as far as paying benefits. So if you are currently a para retiree, you do not need to worry. There is no big problem on the horizon as far as paying benefits. Certainly the equity or the stock portfolio that para depends on for growth has taken a big hit, just like everybody's portfolio is down, right? Your 401ks, et cetera, everyone is feeling that. But that's long-term investment money. And we fully expect, of course, the market to come back and that para will be able to recover that over time. But in the short term, meaning the next year or two, there's no impending issue with paying out benefits. So with that, I'll pause and turn it over to Steve.
Great, thank you. That answered a bunch of the questions all in one. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Senator Hansen. Just to add a little bit to what was just said, A couple notes. One, a big thing on Tabor is that it looks like a progressive tax initiative will be on the ballot this fall, which, as Senator Hansen has described in the past, would essentially allow us to debruce the state and really do take a step forward in terms of what we need in terms of revenues at a critical time. I spoke with Treasurer Dave Young today specifically about para, and he wanted us to remember just a few things. One is, it seems that para has a reset or a true up that is based on the end of the calendar year. So one of the benefits of having experienced the dip at the earlier part of this year is that we will have several months, hopefully towards the end of this calendar year, to gain back a lot of what we have lost. Because that is where the calculation, or when the calculation will be made. Treasurer Young also wanted us to keep bearing in mind, though, that because of this setup, that dip that we experienced at the end of December 2018, Senator Hansen, I know you remember that well, that crucial short blip couldn't have come at a worse time. And so given the 18-month lead time on para adjustments, there's still going to be a para adjustment this July. And that's not based on anything COVID related. That was already baked in. But he doesn't want folks to get confused and notice a dip in their benefits or more or changes or adjustments. They are coming still in July. That was already there. And then finally, just to reiterate what Senator Hansen said, the legislature right now is under tremendous pressure to pare down every bill. Every priority that people have been working on for months, if not years, a lot of the times is being shelved right now because there's neither the bandwidth nor the funds. Legislators are being asked to go back to their stakeholders to eliminate any fiscal notes attached to the bills. But really, the hard questions are being asked as to whether or not this could all be moved to next session when we're not so directly, and urgently addressing the crisis before us. We do have certain things under the Constitution that we must come back and pass, as Chris can expand upon. I know there's the school finance formula and the budget, and a couple other things that we have to get done. But then it's really about prioritizing. So I can't speak for the Senate, but I can tell you in the House that we are meeting regularly with the Democratic caucus. And the overriding message constantly and consistently is there will be no new spending. And anything that we had passed is now on the block because we are just facing, as Senator Hansen described, a projected $500 million shortfall. And in a state that lacks the ability to raise taxes, this is really tying our hands.
Yep. Thank you for that, Representative. All right, Councilwoman Sawyer, let's keep this. I want to get to some of the other issues, but from an economics perspective, funding perspective, there's a finance. There was a request for budget cuts to dealing with falling revenues at the city level. Are there reserves? And talk a little bit about that. Are there reserves that the city has to tap into? What is that sort of? We just heard at the state level sort of downfall or shortfall and filling the gap. What does it look like at the city?
Yeah, so great question. So the vast majority of the city is funded by the general fund. So the general fund gets its funding from a couple of different sources. Property tax revenues, sales and use tax, head tax, lodger's tax, and a couple of other smaller sources, things like parking meters, parking taxes, things like that. So we are estimating we're going to be about $180 million short for the city as well in a $1 billion budget. So we are looking at about a 12% shortage in our budget for this year. All of the city agencies have been asked to cut our budgets by 7.5% to help backfill a lot of that shortage. And then, the city is also looking at its capital improvement plan to determine if there are any projects that are being funded out of the general fund that could be postponed or cut in order to save some money there for this year to help backfill. And then the charter requires that the city hold a certain percentage of our budget in reserves. So we have very healthy reserves. We have some, even above what the charter it requires us to hold, which is fantastic. So we have enough padding there that we will not have to cut any services to our residents this year. But we are looking at, making some tough choices as we move forward on kind of what we're going to be able to do in terms of city projects and things like that. So there are, there are places where we are trimming as city agencies. There are projects where we are looking at where we can be more fiscally responsible, and then we're looking at, tapping into our reserves if we need to. The city is, being very careful. Brendan Hanlon, our CFO, is a fantastic guy. There is no one that I would rather have be in charge of our finances right now. He is really good at balancing sort of, being very conservative where we need to be conservative, but also recognizing where we can kind of make sure that we're providing the residents the services that we need to provide. So, I'm very confident in Brendan's choices. I'm very confident in what the city will continue to offer our residents. But yes, we're going to be about $180 million short this year, which is unexpected. It's a huge hit for us. And it is, requiring us as a city to make some tough choices moving forward.
Yeah, thanks for that. It seems to be sort of the theme of all the conversations that we're having. Appreciate the insights into that. Moving on, Dr. Olson, DPS was an early mover in social distancing and closing down. And there's some downstream effects and impacts of that, particularly with folks that were relying on DPS for food, as well as, a place for their kids to be during the day. We've heard of great things, a lot of food delivery services, a lot of, you guys have served tens or if not hundreds of thousands of meals while school has been shut down. But there's a question about children who can't get to their school to pick up meals. What are those families? What are those children? What are their options in that regard?
So you're right. We were one of the early districts to say, along with Susanna working with other major metros, to say we're going to close the physical school buildings and have an extended spring break. I'd like to remind everybody school isn't closed. Classes are still taking place online. So sometimes when kids hear school's closed, we get emails. Don't have any more school the rest of this year. So, and Susanna jokingly likes to say maybe there's no more snow days. But yes, as of last Friday, we had served 177,000 meals to students. So, yeah, that's incredible. And last Friday alone, we got 35,000 meals out the door. So we started with 8 food distribution sites, which quickly went to 12, which now is at 24. And we have bus routes that deliver food. So you can see that, to whoever asked this question, we are working on getting food out farther and farther to communities of students that can't come. I know we stop at apartment complexes now, and in the beginning, people weren't certain that that's where they could go for food, but we're forever working on that. There's been food pantries. I'd like to shout out the George Washington High School Food Pantry. They've done amazing work in filling in with some of the students who can't even get to our food distribution sites. I know that I've connected them with some people in the community that hopefully can continue to help. And I know our team is still thinking, how can we get food to the families that can't get to us still? I'd like to remind everybody, you don't have to bring your children to come and pick up food. You can just show up at the site and say that I need food for 6 children and 2 adults or whatever it is, and you can get meals for everybody. And so that, to your viewer's question, do we know what percentage of free and reduced lunch students have picked up meals? We don't, because we don't ask for that information. We just ask, are you students or are you adults that need food? Because we're very lucky to have the Denver Public Schools Foundation that's picking up the tab for the adults. The federal government will reimburse us for the meals for children, but we knew that we couldn't stand there. I was there the first day when at first we told adults no, you can't get food. And then I told the Place Bridge worker, just say the school board president said we're going to feed everybody and let's just start giving food to adults. And then we got the message that the DPS Foundation has said that they'll pay for adults. So we have numbers of how many meals we've served, but we don't know the socioeconomic or the ethnicity background of the people who have picked up food. And we're working on expanding our food delivery because no one should go hungry at this point.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. And I do, in talking about school not being closed and moving to this online question, online educational experience, my kids are not quite into DPS yet, so I don't have firsthand experience, but I just got a question regarding what does that online virtual platform, what is that supposed to look like? Is it a mix of live teaching and sort of like virtual, application, someone working through an application? What does the expectation look like for that?
The best way to describe that is we have three options. One option is where everybody signs on at a certain time and the teacher conducts a class and all students are expected to be there at the same time. The other extreme is teachers record and set out assignments for children, say on Monday, and then it's all due by Thursday, it's graded on Friday and returned. And then in the middle is a blend between the two. So we get a lot of questions, especially on Facebook Live, like what time does school start? Why does it start at 8? Why does it start at 11? The best answer is contact your child's school to get the particulars on how they decided to go with whichever model. Schools were given the flexibility to choose.
Great, thank you. All right, Councilwoman Sawyer, we've got a lot of questions as of late regarding some of the challenges that are existing on the east part of Lowry, specifically around Tailwind Park, with some reported violence. This isn't something that's new. It sort of seems like it's gone through some ups and downs. I think there's concerns from neighbors around that area, as well as concerns from residents that live within one of the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless's property there. I know you're working on this, so please share with the community what your findings are and what you're planning on doing.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. This is an issue that has been kind of circling since long before I was ever in office. And so, it's really a conversation between the police department and what the police department is helping to do to kind of make sure that they're, bringing extra patrols at Tailwinds Park and things like that. So what we're gonna do is host a Zoom call next Thursday at 4 p.m. For the residents in East Lowry. And so the information of that will be sent out. We're just waiting for LCMA to provide us with the email addresses for that East Lowry community. And so, that area, the people who live in that area should stay tuned and keep their eyes peeled for that email, that Zoom information. That'll happen next Thursday at 4 p.m.
All right, fantastic. We appreciate that. I know that there's a lot of concern, and so to the community, there's going to be a platform for everyone to voice their concerns next week. So stay
exactly, and that'll be a conversation with LCMA and the Denver Police Department and Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and then our office will be hosting it and facilitating.
Great, thank you for that. As far as going back to the state level. Talking about, a lot of what we've been dealing with over the last 3 weeks is just sort of trying to control this and sort of start gathering information on COVID and coronavirus. We're starting to hear more about the ideas of opening this up gradually. I heard a little bit of the governor's speech today, a press conference about, this isn't an on-off switch, it's more like a dimmer. One of the questions that we received today was that in order for this to open up, people feel like testing is a critical part of that. We've heard a lot about PPE. We've heard a lot of different things. But do you guys have any visibility, Steve or Chris, as to the testing? Is there a team in place working on acquiring tests? Do you guys have any updates or share with the community what the state and then probably the city is doing to increase the numbers of tests available?
Yeah, Paul, that's a wonderful question, and one that has been a very active part of our conversation with the governor's office and with the departments. Let me just kick off this response by sharing, a little bit of good news. We have quadrupled testing capacity at the state in the last 2 weeks. Now, unfortunately, it's quadrupling off of too low of a base. The state is able to execute about 1,000 tests per day. The turnaround time was 4 or 5 days. It's now down to 24 hours. So those are great moves forward. But 1,000 tests a day by the state, plus all the tests that are being done by the hospitals and other healthcare providers, which are several thousand more each per day. I talked to folks at Anschutz and Children's, Rose, all ramping up their testing capacity. So our hospitals that are nearby, in East Denver, are also ramping up rapidly. But you add it all up and it's, thousands of tests per day, but we are still woefully short of where we need to be to have widespread testing and testing that is more proactive instead of what we're doing now, which is basically reactive. Now, the state knows that, the governor's office knows that. They are working hard to get the material, the reagents, et cetera, to increase that further. What I have been told by the State Department of Public Health and Environment and the associated agencies is that they are looking at an early to mid-May before they can get the kind of scale that they need for more widespread testing. So it's essentially on its way. Much shorter delays for acute cases or people who are presenting at hospitals or presenting to the state with symptoms. That testing has improved markedly, but we do not have the widespread testing that we need. And as you heard today from the governor and other governors from around the country, that is critical for us to be able to reduce the amount of stay at home and start to open up society and open up the economy more. We need better testing, tracing, and follow-up and the epidemiology that goes with that. We're not there yet, unfortunately, but the good news is it looks like the supply pipelines, our availability of those materials is going to continue to improve over the coming weeks, and that by mid-May, we should be in a much stronger position. So I don't know, Stephen, do you want to add anything to that?
Just very briefly, that's the current timeline. We are looking at mid-May. Everyone is on the same page with or in agreement with, if we want to get back outside, if we want businesses to really reopen, if we want to be able to really connect with each other once again in each other's physical presence, we have to have robust testing. And we had a serious lag ramping up. It makes you really pine for a more coordinated federal response, but we have to deal with the hand that we're dealt. And we are not singularly focused on that, but it is definitely being prioritized because everyone's on the same page there. The other thing I would mention is, in addition to testing, we need sound data on the results that come back, not only in terms of who's sick and who's not sick, but by race, ethnicity, age, different demographics, so we can winnow down and pare down into who's most at risk and where our resources most effectively allocated. So yes, we need more testing, and we also have to get more data, and we've pushed the governor on both those fronts, especially in the last couple of weeks.
Councilwoman Sawyer, is that testing component primarily a state issue, or is there city work and initiatives that you guys are working on as well?
No, all of that is being coordinated by the state.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. A question that we have that's not specifically related to the pandemic, but there was a big push and a lot of legislation and interest in sustainability in the environment. So there were a lot of across the board. I mean, I can't even think of all of them. Are those dead in the water right now? Are there any legs on any green environmental sustainable bills or initiatives this year?
Yeah, Paul, let me jump in on that one to kick things off. The short answer is yes. There are many of those initiatives that have either already passed before we took the break or are still in process. To the point made earlier by Representative Woodrow, if we've got legislative ideas that were proposed in January and February, and that those ideas require additional state spending, those are basically off the table for the rest of the year. The good news is we can still do a huge amount of forward movement on energy and environmental issues without having to spend any general fund money. I've got a couple of those bills myself, working with colleagues on some additional measures, putting in place programs to keep air pollution down, continue to accelerate our transition to more electric vehicles to reduce air pollution. I've got a bill in motion right now to capture methane to reduce pollution from methane around the state. And all of those can be done through rulemaking and through investment and the future energy plans that we have from our utilities, and don't require general fund. And so I still remain very optimistic that we can push forward with those, continue to reduce carbon emissions and other air pollutants in Denver Metro and around the state, because many of those proposals do not require additional spending. And we're going to continue to push those as we come back to the Capitol, hopefully in May.
Great. Thank you. Council.
Just to piggyback on that, sorry about that. I'm hosting an event tomorrow with Environment Colorado. We're still trying to keep environmental concerns at the forefront through all of this. I'm sure we're all aware of the silver lining here. There are places that have been deeply polluted for years that they're able to see the sky for the first time, and obviously our traffic pollution is way down. But that's going to change when we resume quote unquote normal activities. And so it's imperative that however we strategize about getting out of this, that we think very intentionally about what we build through the crisis. And so I think there's going to be a lot of folks now in the same boat who not only want to put environmental issues and keep those at the forefront, but also things like paid family medical sick leave. I'm sorry about that. Things like a public option for universal health care coverage. So there's a lot of priorities that we can't get done, but there's also things that we need to keep at the forefront. And, environmental issues is certainly one of those.
Yeah, there was a couple of comments just saying, is this an opportunity to change the baseline of what normal is? I mean, whatever that means. And I know it'll be a while till we get to whatever that normalcy is, but perhaps there's an opportunity to push some things forward in that regard.
And Paul, if I can just jump in really quickly, yeah. Also, the city is still, continuing with its climate action process. And so from April 20th to April 30th, there will be a significant outreach process and community engagement process. So people should absolutely, it will be online on Zoom, so people should absolutely participate in that because we are going to continue our climate action process in trying to determine what sorts of ordinances and what sorts of decisions on a city level we want to put forward to help our climate action, achieve our climate action goals on a city level. So that's still happening.
Yeah, thank you. And if anyone, the amount of data that I get from all of your offices is super helpful. So if you're on this Zoom meeting and you're looking to stay connected, the information is coming rapid and furiously. So sign up to all of our panelists' newsletters to be kept up to speed on, and Facebook. Your updates are great as well. Staying with you, Councilwoman Sawyer. The group living ordinance. Yeah. We had a big presentation about that last quarter with LUN. A lot of feedback. Where is that at right now? And does this social distancing concerns about people being together unrelated, does that change things for this this initiative?
No, it doesn't changing the whole things. When the mayor's, gathering the feedback from the community. And so where we are now is that the Group Living Advisory Committee has taken the feedback from the community and is now kind of working through the next steps. What we heard loud and clear from the community is that the recommendation that 8 people in a home be allowed was not well received. And so that change will be made. Unclear what the number will be, whether it will be 6, whether it will be 4, I don't know, but it will definitely not be 8. So that's what's coming next, is sort of a refresh of what those recommendations will be in advisory next, and the other comment period. That's where that's at this point. So they're taking the comment that we received.
I think, can anyone hear me, or is there, I think,
I can hear you, but I couldn't hear Amanda.
But I couldn't hear Councilwoman Sawyer.
We just lost her, so I'm sure she'll dial back in. So stay tuned on that. It's had a lot of visibility, but it sounds like, if I heard correctly, that I think she's.
Did you lose me?
Yeah, you broke up through the majority of that response.
Oh, okay, I'm back. I'm sharing my internet with a household of 6 people, so I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Group Living Advisory. So the initial recommendation for 8 people was not well received. Clearly, no one was happy with it. So what will happen now is the Group Living Advisory Committee has taken the feedback from the community outreach process, is going to consider it all and come back with new recommendations. It's very unlikely that the number will be 8. It's much more likely that it will be 6 or 4. I think it's probably pretty likely that it will be, significantly reduced, but we'll see what they come back with. That's what we're waiting on now. So they will come back with recommendations probably early summer, and then there'll be another community outreach process where people will get to provide more feedback again, and then we'll go from there. There's plenty of time left, and at this point, Group Living Advisory Committee is, making new recommendations, writing up a draft of the bill. We'll see it, and then there's plenty more time for changes and more discussion. So it's there's still a long way to go.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Olson, there's, and I don't even know what the current status is as far as pass-fail with DPS. Where are we at with that? And what are the pros and cons of this decision? What does it play not only to today, but down the road for college admissions and GPAs? Like, can you share we got a couple questions about that.
Right. So there has been a lot of discussion on that. And actually, we weren't ever thinking of pass fail. We were thinking of credit, no credit. And that's a big difference. So if you had a fail, an F on your report card, that would mean that you didn't get any credit for it. And you had taken the class and you didn't meet the requirements. It was either a credit or a no credit. But we have heard a significant amount of concerns from people saying, no, we really want grades. So I know that Susanna and her team have taken that advice under consideration, and they're hosting webinars. This morning they did it with the 9 through 12 school leaders, and then tomorrow is the K-8 school leaders, and then the overlap with schools that are 6-12. They could attend both to figure out how to work that out and to learn more about the ins and outs of what that would look like. I'd just like to remind everybody, especially our seniors, we hear a lot from seniors on the call, if they're here now, or we've had them on Facebook, worrying about what colleges will think. And a lot of schools are starting to send out updates saying, we understand that if your school district is going to credit or no credit, we understand what that means for your college acceptance, and juniors thinking about that. So I like to remind students that they're not the only ones in this situation right now. It's not just Denver, it's the entire country, and colleges are certainly going to look at that. But look for more information to come out in tomorrow, early next week, from our school teams to let you know exactly where we've decided on that. But we really appreciate everybody weighing in and sending us emails. I know I've gotten so many emails, I can't keep up with them anymore around this issue, from students who are saying we really want pass credit or no credit. I almost said the wrong word, because some students still don't have internet access. Some students still don't have Chromebooks. Some students I know are taking care of younger siblings because their family, adults in their family, are considered essential workers, and they're out at the grocery store as they're out working on the buses. And so they're left at home caring for younger siblings and getting them online. So doing schoolwork has been a challenge during the day. So they're thankful that we're considering the option of credit or no credit. But then there's other students who've worked hard their entire high school career to make sure their grades were a certain point, and they don't want it to be just credit or no credit. So we're weighing all of the options right now, but we really appreciate the huge lift our teachers and our school leaders have done to think through all this and work with our students. Some teachers are having office hours in the evening, which I've learned, the people on this call already know, I keep hearing stories of children who were previously unengaged who are now engaged in school because they have more access to their teachers during a time that works for them. So as Dr. Barbara Bryan reminds us on the school board, the shape of public education is going to be changed forever after this epidemic, because we've learned so many different ways to educate students, and we've learned so much, and we're still learning. It's not perfect yet.
Yeah, I've got two little ones, and the preschools have done a great job with Zoom meetings, and it's hard, but everyone's just working and figuring it out. And I've learned about homeschooling here over the last couple of weeks. It's been.
And as I have a sister-in-law who's a homeschooler, and she likes to remind people that this isn't homeschooling, this is crisis schooling. If you were a true homeschooler, you would have done professional development in the fall with your homeschool team, or you would have read resources online. You would have had time to plan and create a structure and look at the scope and sequence for the whole year. So she said, in many ways, what all parents are doing now is much harder than homeschooling, because you weren't prepared for this. And you hadn't thought about doing this over the summer, and you're not connected with other adults who have been mentoring you along the way on how to homeschool. So crisis schooling.
I appreciate that. That's a much more accurate term to call it. Thank you. I want to go down the panel. When this all first came out, there was a big focus on washing hands, and everyone was washing their hands till their knuckles were bleeding. And the big push we've heard over the last week was the face masks. And the governor at one of the press conferences a couple of days ago announced a contest, I think, for kids to design cool and fun face masks, just to sort of make it a little less, unusual for those kids. I'm curious to know what you guys are seeing around adoption of people wearing face masks. I can say it's been sort of hit or miss from what I've seen. What are you guys seeing, and what can we do, and what can you do to drive better adoption if there is a gap? Chris, you want to start?
Sorry, I muted myself to create more bandwidth. Yeah, Paul, I'm happy to kick that off. I think your observation is the right one at this point. I think it's been a little bit hit and miss. I live in the Montclair neighborhood, just north of Lowry, and have the pleasure of walking around Montclair Park and down toward Lowry on days when I can. And my observation is that it's about 50-50. I'm seeing people who are taking it seriously and social distancing and getting the masks on, and I'm seeing maybe half the folks that I see out on the parks or on the street who are not. And yeah, it's frustrating. We know that it does make a difference. We know that it works both as a physical barrier as well as a psychological reminder to not touch your face and a reminder to keep more distance. There's clear evidence that it does work. And I think, we all need to do our part to model it, to remind people. I know the city and the state are trying to use a fairly soft hand when it comes to enforcement, to remind people to do their part. And I think, for folks joining us on the line tonight, please, take it seriously and be a part of that. Help us remind people you see, get a mask and be part of that important part of this solution. And, and we know that it makes a discernible difference when it comes to flattening the curve.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I'll just echo that, especially the points about masks serving a dual role. They not only provide that physical barrier in case you're coughing, maybe you're even asymptomatic, but you could still spread it to others. It decreases that likelihood, but it also has the psychological effect. When you see folks wearing masks, you tend to just naturally respond by keeping a little bit more of a safe distance. And both of those are crucial right now. My last thing that I would just add is that if we want to keep the parks open, and I know many of us or most of us really do, because we really need the parks right now, we're going to have to come together and really impress upon folks to wear masks. And we don't want to necessarily resort to having a mandatory rule imposed upon people, but if that's what it comes to keep the parks open, I worry that that's the direction we're headed. I'd much prefer to see people do it voluntarily, and I look forward to continuing to model that. I have a really cool mask that a neighbor made for me, and if you need one, let me know.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, for mentioning the parks. I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that that is probably the #1 call that we are getting to our office right now. All weekend long, we come in on Monday morning and we probably have 40 voice messages from people saying, particularly in the parks in Lowry and Cranmer Park, that there are people that are just all enjoying the parks, which is wonderful. That's what they're there for. But that people are using the parks, not social distancing, not wearing masks. And my fear is that if people continue to do that and we don't achieve the kind of leveling of the curve that we need to achieve, and the economic devastation that we're seeing right now continues, that we're going to have to close the parks in order to change the conversation in some way. So, because we can't continue the economic devastation that we have going on forever. That's just not something that's going to be feasible for us to do for the long term. And so, what are we going to have? We're going to have to make a change here if the community members can't, do the right thing. And so I really hope that everyone will please do the right thing. Wear masks. We know they're uncomfortable. We don't like wearing them either. We know that they're not fashion statements, but please do the right thing and wear masks in public anyway. Please feel free to use the parks. That's what they're there for, but social distance. Don't abuse this privilege because it's really important. Otherwise, we'll have to change the conversation in some way, and that's not gonna be something that anyone is going to enjoy. Thanks.
Just echo everything everybody else said. And the only other thing I'll add around that is I know we are starting to hear from families, it's been a long time, my kids haven't had a play date. Couldn't they just sneak over for a little bit and the kids will be okay? We know them, they haven't been out of their house. No, please, not only wear your mask, but hang in there. No play dates, no sleepovers. No getting together to play on the playground equipment, even though you're not supposed to, even just for a little bit. If you clean it, please hang in there. I know this is really hard, especially when you've had a lot of little ones or cranky middle schoolers in your home for a long time, but hang in there and follow the rules and do your part, Colorado.
Yeah, thank you. All right, saving the hardest question for the last. I've got 5 minutes left, and we're not done with COVID. We're not done with coronavirus. My wife's birthday is May 7th, and she wants to go out to dinner. She's also a physician, so she understands the realities of this. And we were having a debate last night to say, what does the world look like once this opens up? What decisions are we going to make, knowing that there is always a risk? There is a risk for all sorts of viruses that are still out there that have different levels of mortality. So what are you guys looking at to say, here's what I'm looking at, here's the numbers, here's the considerations, here are the things that I'm looking at to say we're feeling comfortable about loosening things up, about sort of moving the dimmer on that light switch? Because the number one concern was always not overloading the healthcare system so that people that had treatable conditions would have an opportunity to be treated. So it seems like we're sort of we're feeling like we're getting okay on that. We're getting a little bit more comfortable about that not being the crisis for today. But what are you guys looking at? Like, what is the new normal? What are you guys looking at to say, hey, I'm comfortable to have school open up in the fall, or or support some of these other expansion or loosening of these restrictions? Chris, I'll start with you, and then we can go down the line and wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Paul. It's such a great question. I mean, I think for all of our peace of mind, we do have to look forward together. How can we be optimistic about the recovery, about getting back to more normal day to day? And so I think this is a hugely important question. I think we've touched on it collectively a little bit already, which is the testing, tracing, epidemiology. We need to have the resources in place to do that and to do it on a wide scale basis. Obviously, there are brilliant scientists who are racing to a vaccine right now. We have worldwide global cooperation on that. It was one of the things I was so dismayed by today, seeing our president cutting funding to the World Health Organization, which is one of the organizations that is working so hard on a coordinated infrastructure for vaccine testing. It is crazy to make that move. And I think Bill Gates said it best when he said, yeah, that's as dangerous as it sounds. And unfortunately, that's what we're getting right now from our national leadership. That aside, what does it mean for Colorado? We need the testing, we need the tracing, we need the follow-up in place. And the new normal is going to look different. It's going to require us all to act differently, to interact differently. I think social spacing is going to continue. There's going to be a gradual opening up of businesses and the economy, and it's going to require that we act a little bit differently. Thinking that we're going to be back at Red Rocks this summer doesn't look good. Big gatherings, conferences, concerts, are going to be off the calendar for the medium term. And so I think it's going to be gradual. I think the governor did a nice job of talking about the benchmarks he's looking for, and other governors have done that. But I would say, just to wrap up my answer, I think that the testing, tracing capability, we're going to have to continue to ramp that up, and that's a big part of reopening.
Thanks. I would agree with that. As we've talked about before, a huge part is the testing and the tracing. Another thing, though, is just we've been suffering collectively through a trauma the past several weeks together. This is something that's unprecedented. None of us have had much experience living through a real life, dangerous global pandemic. And so even as we take these steps to stabilize our society and make sure that we have the capacity and that we're not overwhelming the medical system, and it serves as some sort of bridge until we have a vaccine or herd immunity and truly get past this, as we have with other pandemics of the past 100+ years. Psychologically, I think it's going to take a long time for us to really mend and become whole again and get back to a place of trust. I think we're going to see a period of time where we just naturally maintain more of a distance from one another, and you know, obsessively wash hands and engage in good hygiene practices for just a longer period of time. I'm also very concerned about our small businesses, the ones who are fighting to survive right now. They're the lifeblood of our economy. They provide the majority of jobs in this country, and we need to be very intentional about helping them make it through this. So while we have the health piece, we have to have that crucial economic piece. And something that Dr. Olson has impressed upon me in several meetings is we all need to treat each other with grace and with empathy and a lot of understanding. You know, and I say that, and then so I show up at the supermarket at the wrong time and people are fighting over carts. So let's redouble our efforts as we move forward to remember that we are all in this together. No one is going to have the perfect answer. We know federal relief dollars are coming, but it's not enough and it's not happening quickly enough. We want to help with that. We want to be here and be supportive to either lobby for more money to come as quickly as possible or to help get the resources that have already been allocated. So I do see us transitioning to a point where we do stabilize and we do get past this, but it is going to be gradual and it's going to take us all being very good to each other.
Thank you. And I know that the question for me will be, are schools going to open up again in the fall? What about summer school? We get this all the time. And I can tell you that the lesson I've learned through all of this is that our senior leadership team at Denver Public Schools and Susana Cordova are always in touch with the public health experts here in the state of Colorado, listening to them. I'll never forget the first day that I sat in on a meeting with Susana as we were trying to learn more about the situation, and they painted this grim picture of closing everything, and I thought they were crazy. But after about an hour, I realized they were really smart and understanding what the impacts of this disease is. And so we don't know yet. We are listening to the public health experts. Susana Cordova and her team are in touch with all of the superintendents in the major metro area here of Denver so that she and the other superintendents are thinking along the same lines, getting knowledge from each other. And she participates in a weekly call with superintendents from across the United States as my fellow board colleagues, talking with other board members from here across the metro area and across our country to learn how other people are thinking about this. So I just would like to reassure everybody that no matter what comes our way, know that we are thinking about how to do remote learning for summer school, if that's what we end up needing to do. And if we end up needing to start the fall for remote learning, we will have teams working on that. So we will be taking care of the children as well as we can, but it's way too early to tell when we'll be able to open up our school buildings again. But remember, school's still in session. So, and thank you, Representative Woodrow, for my little lecture that I always give people about having grace with each other. Sometimes I have to tell myself that when I'm on the phone with someone who's crying and yelling at me about something. And I think, you know, everybody reacts to this in a different way, right? Like we just have to be kind with each other. And even with people who I sometimes don't have a lot of patience with, I'm giving them extra patience because we're all in this together and everybody's dealing with things in a different way. And you don't know what they're dealing with at home with people who are ill or people losing their jobs. Like I've heard from families who most people would think they're doing okay, but they've lost their jobs if they're independent contractors. And there's just a lot of stress. So I do think we have to be kind and take care of everybody, but thank you for reminding me of that.
Yep, I think that's right. You know, thank you all so much. And I think, you know, we just have to have patience, and it's really hard to do that. You know, the two things that we probably all need to have as a community are the two most difficult things that we can find as a community together, and that's patience and faith. But, you know, we will get through this, and we will get through this together. Because that's the only way that we can do this. It's the only option we have. So, you know, we will get through this, and we will get through this together. We just have to hang in there. So thank everyone very, very much for all of your patience and all of your faith. Hang in there. Thank you.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. I want to thank all the panelists. You guys are working tirelessly, night and day. You did not hesitate a second to sign up for this conversation with our community. And I know that you're doing the best, and resources are coming in from unexpected ways, but they're also challenges that we never even can even imagine that we're anticipating, that we're trying to come up with creative solutions. So thank you all for your interaction and conversation with our community. I also want to thank the dozens and dozens of people that from Lowry that jumped on this call. Many of you have never been on a LUN meeting before. So thank you for raising your hand and wanting to be a part of this community. We all have to do this together, and that's what LUN's been here for, and we will continue to be here for. So we'll send a follow-up email. This meeting is recorded. Want to get your feedback on this. I know that there's questions that we weren't able to get answered. I'm happy that there's some next steps coming out of some of the concerns that were raised, but stay strong, and let's work through this together. You know, we can help each other out through this tough time. And thanks to the LUN board for letting us do this.
And
so
thanks for hosting, Paul. Thanks for putting it all together.
It's my
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, thanks, guys. Have a great night. Lowry, be safe. And I think there's going to be some howling at 8 o'clock. Are we still doing that? All right. All right. Let's let out a howl at 8 o'clock for our first responders. Thank you, guys. Have a great night. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.